You two are finally caught! Look at what you did to this place!
All right, move it. Keep walking.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. What happens when the two men who once harmed Toan start planning another job? Completely unaware that the police have been quietly tracking their every move. Inside an abandoned house, in the middle of an empty lot, Thai and Lich believe they've gotten away safely. They need money. They're willing to take risks, and another innocent person could end up becoming their next victim. But at that very moment, hidden behind the dark tree line, Police Chief Thu and his team are ready to close in. Will the arrest go smoothly? Or will these desperate men fight back to the very end? And will justice for Toan finally be served? Today's episode takes you into a tense, edge-of-your-seat manhunt, where even the smallest mistake could come at a deadly cost. If you enjoy intense, suspenseful, and emotional stories like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. And now let's get started. Inside the small wooden house on the farm, the morning sunlight slipped through the cracks in the door, casting thin streaks of light across the floor. The air was so peaceful, you could clearly hear the wind moving through the trees and the distant sound of chickens. Toan leaned against a wooden post, watching lytudiem get ready to head out for the harvest. She didn't say much, but every movement showed her care, checking the straps on the basket, straightening her scarf, setting aside some water, and a little cash just in case. Toan understood that beneath her calm exterior was quiet worry. She was afraid he'd be disappointed if he still couldn't find work, afraid he would blame himself for not being able to provide a better life. But instead of pressing him with questions or complaining, she chose to give him confidence through her gentleness and steady support. That was what made Toan feel like he still mattered, like he still had a place to come home to. He felt the same way. He didn't want lytudiem carrying the weight of worry every day, didn't want her stressing over every meal or every small expense. He knew he couldn't stand still in this temporary peace forever. He needed a stable job not to prove anything, but to protect the life they were trying to rebuild from nothing. As lytudiem stepped out through the gate, Toan watched her for a long moment. A feeling rose in his chest, both warm and heavy at the same time. Warm because someone was always by his side, heavy because the more he valued her, the less he could allow himself to fail. He turned back inside, adjusted his clothes, and prepared to leave. Today he would start again quietly, patiently, and determined not to let her worry anymore. In his second-floor office at headquarters, Police Chief Thu sat in front of a thick stack of case files. The desk lamp cast a focused light over pages filled with witness statements, crime scene photos, and forensic reports. He turned each page slowly, his eyes locked on the details related to the attack on Toan. A case that seemed simple at first, but had too many unusual signs to ignore. The door suddenly swung open. A young officer stepped in, his face tense. The news about Thai and Lich instantly shifted the mood in the room. According to intelligence reports, the two suspects were hiding in an abandoned house on the edge of town and showed signs of planning another job. That meant if they didn't act quickly, more people could get hurt. Thu stood up immediately and closed the file. His expression hardened, sharp, and decisive. He understood exactly how dangerous these two were, desperate for money, reckless, and not afraid to use violence. The fact that they had already attacked Toan proved they were far from minor offenders. Within minutes, the once quiet office turned urgent. Bulletproof vests were pulled from the cabinet. Handguns were carefully checked. Radios were switched to the proper frequency. A map of the area was spread across the desk, with the suspected location clearly marked. Footsteps echoed quickly down the hallway. 2 vehicles pulled away from headquarters, their lights flashing against the falling night. Somewhere out there, 2 dangerous men still had no idea the net was already closing in. The road in front of the construction site was still dusty after the New Year holiday, with only a few vehicles passing by. Toan pulled his motorbike over to the side, lost in thought about finding a new job, when he suddenly heard a familiar voice calling from behind. He turned around and recognized Alex, a close business partner, from the years when his company had been at its peak. The meeting was completely unexpected. They looked at each other for a few seconds, both surprised and emotional. Alex still carried the same confident presence as before, while Toan looked much more modest in his work clothes and on his old motorbike. Without saying much, Alex invited him to grab a drink at a nearby cafe, sitting upstairs in the small shop with the sound of traffic below and the faint scent of lemon tea in the air. Toan slowly shared what had happened. He talked about losing the company, about his mother moving overseas, and about the truth that he wasn't her biological son. He didn't complain or blame anyone. He simply told the story like someone who had come to accept reality. Alex listened carefully, his expression growing more serious. Instead of showing pity, Alex chose to encourage him. He brought up the projects they had worked on together and reminded Toan of his ability and resilience. He said that all Toan needed was one opportunity to stand back up. Then he offered to reach out to his contacts and recommend him for a suitable position. Alex's words didn't just open the door to a job opportunity. They restored a sense of belief that Toan thought he had already lost. When he left the cafe, Toan felt lighter inside. The road ahead might still be difficult, but he knew he wasn't completely alone. The abandoned house sat alone in an empty lot on the edge of town, surrounded by knee-high weeds and a few fallen, dried-out tree trunks. Dusk was settling in the last light of sunset, fading behind a row of low buildings in the distance, leaving everything in a tense half-light. Inside, 2 figures stayed close to a broken window. Thai paced back and forth, his face tight with frustration. Lich crouched on the floor absent-mindedly, flipping a folding knife in his hand, his eyes darting toward the darkness outside. Days on the run had made them both more irritable and more reckless. They needed money, and they were already planning their next move, completely unaware that the net around them was tightening. Not far away, behind a large tree, Police Chief Thu and another officer watched carefully. They were in plain clothes, bulletproof vests hidden underneath. Their radios were set to vibrate. Thu's eyes never left the house. He had been tracking the case involving Toan's assault for days, and tonight was the chance to end it. He gave a hand signal. Behind him, 2 other teams quietly moved into position, blocking off the exits. Everything happened in near silence, except for the wind whistling through the rusted tin roof. Inside, Thai had just stood up when he suddenly froze. Something didn't feel right, but before he could react, the rotting door was kicked in. Flashlights cut straight across his face, blinding him. "Don't move." The command rang out sharply, tearing through the silence. Lich jumped up on instinct and bolted toward the back door. But as soon as he turned, he found an officer already blocking his way. He pulled out his knife, the blade flashing in the dark. "Drop the weapon," Thu stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. Lich hesitated for a split second, then lunged. It all happened in seconds. Thu's partner moved fast, slamming him to the ground. The knife flew from his hand and clattered loudly across the concrete floor. Thai tried to run toward the front door, but was immediately restrained. His arms were forced behind his back, handcuffs snapping shut with a hard metallic click. "You've got the wrong guys," he shouted, struggling. But it was useless. Thu walked over, his cold gaze fixed on the two men who had once harmed Toan. He knew this wasn't just another case. It was an answer to the days Toan had spent living with injustice and pain. In the distance, police sirens grew louder as backup units arrived. The two suspects were escorted outside under flashing red and blue lights. Night fully settled in, but for Thu, a critical piece of the case had finally fallen into place. And for Toan, justice had at last begun to speak. Toan didn't know any of that had happened. When he left the cafe after meeting Alex, the sky had already begun to darken. The air carried that quiet coolness that comes after sunset when the noise of the day slowly fades. He rode his motorbike back along the narrow road toward the farm, the engine humming steadily beneath him. His mind was still replaying the conversation, a job opportunity. The words felt fragile, like something that could disappear if he held on to them too tightly. He had learned not to expect too much. Still, for the first time in a long while, the future didn't look completely closed off. By the time he reached the small wooden house, the porch light was already on. Lytudiem was inside, moving between the kitchen corner and the table. Through the thin curtain, he could see her silhouette, calm, steady, familiar. He parked the bike and stepped inside. "You're back," she said softly, looking up. "Yeah," he replied, placing his helmet down. There was no dramatic exchange, no rush of questions. That was how they had learned to live gently without pressure. She set a bowl of soup in front of him. "I kept it warm." "Thank you." He washed his hands and sat down. The house was simple. A wooden table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed behind a thin divider, and a shelf with neatly folded clothes. Outside, crickets had begun their steady chorus. For a moment, neither of them spoke. But the silence was not heavy. It was the kind built from understanding. "I ran into someone today," Toan said finally. Lytudiem paused, her eyes lifting slightly. "Someone you know, Alex." She blinked in surprise. She remembered the name. She had heard it before from the time when Toan's life had been very different. "What did he say?" "He asked how I've been." I told him. Most of it. He didn't need to explain what most of it meant. She knew. "And he said he might help me connect with one of his partners. There could be a position opening up." He said it carefully, without excitement, as if he were afraid to let hope sound too loud. Lytudiem didn't smile widely or gasp. She simply nodded once firmly. "That's good," she said. "You deserve that chance." Her tone carried certainty, not encouragement for its own sake, but belief. Toan looked at her across the table. The soft light above them made her face look even more tired than usual. She had worked all day under the sun, harvesting and sorting produce. Her hands were slightly rough, her fingers still faintly stained from the fields. "I don't want you working that hard forever," he said quietly. She gave a small shrug. "It's honest work." "I know, but still." She understood what he meant. He wasn't ashamed of their life now. He just wanted more stability, safety, a future that didn't feel like it could collapse again at any moment. Outside, a car passed along the distant road, an uncommon sound at that hour. Neither of them paid attention. Miles away, paperwork was being processed. Statements were being recorded. Tai and Lich sat in separate holding rooms under harsh fluorescent lights, their earlier defiance replaced by silence. But in the small house on the farm, the world remained quiet. After dinner, lytudiem gathered the dishes while Toan stepped outside to wash up at the basin near the well. The night sky stretched wide and clear above him. He took a slow breath. For the first time in months, something inside him felt steadier. He didn't know that the danger hanging over his life had just been pulled away. He didn't know that the men who once ambushed him, who had left him injured and shaken, were now sitting behind locked doors. He only knew that he wanted to keep moving forward. When he stepped back inside, lytudiem was folding laundry on the bed. "Are you nervous?" she asked suddenly. "About what?" "The job." He sat down beside her. "A little." She placed a folded shirt aside and looked at him directly. "Even if it doesn't work out, it's still progress." He nodded. That was what she always did. She made failure feel survivable. They lay down later than usual. The wooden walls creaked softly as the temperature dropped. lytudiem turned toward him in the dark. "You've been carrying a lot," she said. "So have you." She didn't argue. After a pause, she reached for his hand beneath the thin blanket. Her fingers intertwined with his, naturally as if they had memorized each other's shape. No promises were spoken. No dramatic vows. Just quiet contact in the dark. Somewhere in town, a report was being finalized with Toan's name on it, listed as the victim in a closed arrest operation. Chief Thu signed the final page with a firm stroke of his pen. "It's done," one of the officers said. Thu gave a short nod. For now, back at the farm, Toan stared up at the ceiling. He thought about the attack, about the suddenness of it, the confusion, the anger. He had tried not to dwell on it. There had been too many other things collapsing in his life at the time: the company, his family, the truth about his mother. The assault had almost felt like just another blow. But tonight, strangely, the memory didn't sting as sharply. "I'll make it work," he said softly into the dark. lytudiem squeezed his hand once. "I know." Morning came slowly. Sunlight filtered through the wooden slats again, just like the day before. The world looked unchanged. Roosters crowed. Wind moved through the trees. A truck rumbled faintly along the distant road. Toan woke before lytudiem. He lay there for a moment, listening to her breathing. He carefully slipped out of bed, not wanting to wake her yet. Today, he planned to visit the address Alex had texted him late last night, an office building in the city where he could submit his resume and meet a hiring manager. He washed up, dressed in his cleanest shirt, and prepared quietly. When lytudiem stirred, she sat up slowly. "You're leaving early," she said. "Yeah. I want to get there before it gets crowded." She stood and walked over, adjusting his collar automatically the way she always did. "Call me when you're done." "I will." For a brief second, he hesitated, then pulled her into a hug. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. Just steady. "Whatever happens," she murmured, "we deal with it together." He nodded against her shoulder. As he rode away, the morning light stretched long shadows across the dirt path. He felt the familiar mix of uncertainty and determination, but no fear. He didn't know that at that exact moment, Chief Thu was briefing his team about notifying the victim. "We'll inform him today," Thu said. "He deserves to know." But notifications take time. Procedures require steps, and so for a few more hours, Toan remained unaware. He rode toward the city with quiet resolve, thinking only about interviews and second chances. Behind him in the small wooden house, lytudiem stood at the doorway, watching until he disappeared from view. she felt something she couldn't quite name. Not worry exactly, but a lingering tension that had followed them for months. She shook it off and turned back inside. There was work to do. Neither of them knew that the shadow hanging over their lives had already been lifted. Neither of them knew that justice had quietly begun its work in the background. For now, they only had each other, a fragile opportunity, and the determination to rebuild. And sometimes that was enough.